Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Welcome, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing today?
Good, good. We got a full house here today. My wife is working from home. My children are at home.
All of them?
Just two of them, the two that go to
Okay.
school still. Yeah.
Right.
All three of the boys, my sons are currently looking for work because of the economy right now. Their old work was shut down.
Yeah.
So tough times, Bruce.
Boy, are they ever. Are they
Yeah.
ever. Tough as I can remember, David. Of course, I'm a boomer, so I haven't lived through the real tough things like the Depression or the World Wars or anything. But
Very few
this,
people alive have at this point, is the truth. This is the biggest, we'll see. We'll see what we think about this a year from now, what we're all saying about a year from now. Maybe it's still unknown how bad this is. It could be calamitous, total disaster. Or
right.
maybe a year from now we think, boy, that ended fast and it
Huh.
was really, life just went on.
I
So we'll
sure hope
find
you're
out.
right on that one. And that's,
Me
I
too,
have my
Bruce.
doubts.
Yeah,
Feels like a
we'll
game
see.
changer, doesn't it?
Well, we'll know more in the next little while. We'll
Yeah.
know more in the next little while. All right. We are here not to mourn the loss of the old world, but to delve into the possibility that there will be a future for the Edmonton Oilers in this new one. And there's still the chance. There's still a chance there's going to be a playoffs. And of course, we're doing our regular work. We're used to shutting down kind of Oilers talk by this time of year, Bruce,
April
because
6th.
yeah, the season's usually over and usually the Oilers are done. What is it, 12 of the last 13 years? Is that it?
Yeah.
They've been done. So this
Yep.
is just business as usual. It's just a little bit more uh, despairing in the real world than it usually is just despairing in oil country. Now it's everywhere. So Bruce, we're going to talk today about Yamamoto, Ken Holland, his ability to procure wingers, and the Oilers' power play, because you're working on a season-ending series on the Oilers' season. All right, so let's start off with one thing though that kind of a loose end from the last podcast.
Sure.
At that time, there was an indication that Philip Berglund, well, he has signed a 2-year contract with the new Swedish team. But there's an indication now. Bob Stauffer was talking to Scott Housen. He used to be with the Oilers and until
Oh,
recently. And Scott Housen was saying that actually the Oilers, in terms of what he knows, the Oilers are in negotiations with both Berglund and Marcus Niemelainen, kind of a huge, rangy, low-scoring right shot D-man. Or is he
he's a
left shot?
lefty. He's a
Yeah,
lefty. Berglund's
lefty
a
and
right.
Berglund's right. So when we were talking about it, we were looking at it, and it didn't make sense to either of us that the Oilers wouldn't try to get this player because
Hmm.
he's a right shot. The Oilers are a little low on right shot D-man, certainly in the AHL for next year, and who knows, maybe going forward because there's this expansion draft. So the Oilers might have a chance at getting this player, which is good news, correct?
Oh, I'll say it's good news. I mean, he's been on Skellefteå since he was 14. He came up through the system. They have a club feeder system over there, like they do in the football clubs and so on. And he was in that team the whole time. And he just did some kind of a Texas two-step where not only did he sign a contract for, the Oilers have to sign him by June 1st of this year. Not only did he sign a contract for next season and the season following, he did it with a different club. So it looked like he just decided on a new course that his career was going. And yet the point was made by a friend of the blog, Original Posar, to us that just because a guy signs in Sweden doesn't mean he's ineligible to come over here. It just he just sucked me in just because of the nature of the move. It seemed like a full-out move and a career decision by him. But Joachim Nygard, he actually signed a 3-year contract in Sweden last summer before he signed with the Oilers, and he bailed on that. I think what it means is that the team that signed him, Linköping, is probably entitled to some kind of a transfer fee, but that's relatively small potatoes. And if the Oilers can convinced this guy to sign. And Scott Howson not only said they were talking to him, he said he thinks they were going to sign him. It sounded like he was quite confident. So he's a 22-year-old right shot Swedish defenseman. Now, not tell me what's not to like about any of those words I just strung together. 6'3", 209, all-purpose defenseman who's just coming off career highs with 5 goals, 15 assists, and 20 points to finish in the top 20 among Swedish league defensemen for scoring. And I mean, scoring's not his primary. It's not like he's not Joel Pearson, right? He's a way more complete player than that. And more to it, he played much of the season partnered with Philip Broberg, Oilers' first-round draft pick from 2019. Now, Broberg has already signed with the Oilers and was loaned back to the Swedish League. He has one more sort of junior age season to go, which he could again be loaned back to the Swedish League. But if the Oilers can ink Philip Berglund and Philip Broberg, I get these guys mixed up because only one syllable is different between their names, Philip and Berglund and Broberg. Anyway, there's a non-zero chance. To me, this is sort of the ideal solution. They could bring the two of them over, airlift them in together into Bakersfield next year, get them going on the North American game, playing together at least part of the time so that there's some familiarity. There's a little bit of a soft landing for each guy, playing with the guy they're familiar with who speaks their own language and so on. And it would be, it'd be a nice boost for Bakersfield, who lost two and a half of their top young defensemen this year when all of Ethan Bear, Caleb Jones, and at least in part, William Lagesson all got promoted to the NHL. That they were down a couple of quarts on the blue line down there in Bakersfield, and it showed. So all that there's way more room for hope there than it seemed like on Monday, and I guess we're not privy to some of the nuts and bolts of how they negotiate and how Swedes negotiate in the Swedish league, but it sounds like Berglund is still very much in play, and if he is. Great. He's got 200 games in the Swedish league. So, I mean, one option is they could sign him and loan him back to Linköping for at least one of those 2 years, but I don't see why they need to. Like 200 games over there, 0 games over here. He needs to get going in the North American rinks if indeed he has designs on an NHL future.
There could be some major turnover in Bakersfield next year. If Lagesson makes the NHL, for instance, as a seventh D-man. Mm-hmm. So let's just look at their D, quickly run down the D-core there, because that would be bringing in 2 players. I don't think they're going to bring anyone else. But
not if they got both those guys.
So Evan Bouchard could, depends what happens with Benning, I guess, this summer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you'd think they're going to keep around Larson at this point, the way he played, Bruce, at the end of the year, man. Like, I would expect that. You never know. But so Bouchard could make the Oilers, taking Benning's job essentially. Lagesson is the 7th. Well, if they move out Russell and Benning, then Bouchard is a favorite to make the Oilers. And Bouchard, 36 points in 54 games, and by the end he was about kind of a point per game guy for the last 20 games or so, I understand. There's Logan Day, who's 24. I think he was on a 1-year ELC this year. I'm not a huge fan of his game. I don't see him as a NHL prospect. So maybe he'll come back. There's Jake Kulovich, who's 26 this year. He's kind of a AHL third pairing kind of guy. Maybe he comes back. Yeah, minor league contract. Maybe he comes back. That's a possibility, because he played okay in Bakersfield this year when I saw him. There's Dmitry Samarukov, who is 20 this year, needs to play more, 100%. And will be getting more playing time. He played 47 games Bakersfield this year, 10 points, -5 goals plus minus. He's a very promising player. Needs to play more. Brandon Manning won't be back. I wonder if Keegan Lowe will be back. I doubt it, Bruce. Nope. So if they bring, they've got some holes there. Obviously, that's a lot of players. That's a lot of players leaving town. So they're
Hmm.
going to have to. I could see them bringing over Broberg and Berglund, and I could see
Yeah,
that. Boy, that sounded when you mentioned that, it sounded like a kind of a genius move that someone's
it's
been thinking there. That sounds like a very good move in terms of introducing both of those players to
100%.
North American hockey. I don't see any. Is there any
100%.
other Swedes on the team this year? I don't believe so.
No,
Lagesson,
they
of
had
course,
they
but
had
he.
Joel Persson there for a while, and of course they moved him along at the trade deadline, so he's out of the picture entirely now. And so they're down. They need another right shot somewhere in the system, almost regardless of what happens with at the 6-7 level at the NHL. They're going to want to bring in somebody, and a Bergman, I mean, 4 years out from his draft year, 22 years old, like say 200 games in the Swedish league and another 30 in the playoffs. Like that's a prime candidate to me. I'd love to see that happen, and if they could convince them to come together, so much the better. I mean, Broberg got his one good year against men in the Swedish league. Well, another year against men in the AHL, his contract could still slide. And then by 2021, maybe he's ready to go. Maybe they're both ready to go. I mean, who knows, right? But they got room. All the guys you listed, only Samorkov to me is a slam dunk lead pipe cinch to be on the Bakersfield Condors in 2020
I
this
could
fall.
see. I could see Day and Kulovich getting AHL contracts.
Maybe. Day every time
Uh,
I watch Bakersfield, Day's playing right wing. I mean, he's not a real defense prospect. He's kind of an offensive rover type
yeah, so
that
maybe
they like his talent, but I would be shocked to see him have an NHL career, I gotta
it
say.
looks to me like they're going to be bringing in, excuse me, a real veteran player too, Bruce. They're going to need someone, at least
Yep,
one. Hope maybe Ryan Stanton's free this summer. Bring him back, man. He's a good
that
hockey
style
player.
of player, yeah.
Yeah, I really like him, and someone like that, or Brandon Davidson. He'll probably be free again. Bring him back as your veteran D man. Okay, Bruce, let's talk about something that I've tracked for a long time, and this is something called we that I've always called hard plays at the net. And
Hmm.
initially, it was just on goals that we track this. And what it
Right.
is, it's essentially it's when a player, and it was initially just screening the goalie, but we in terms of hard plays now, we count them all for all grade A chances for. It's goalie screens, when you tip the puck on net, when you jam the puck in the crease. So that's you're in tight. There's a battle for the puck in the crease, and you get a jam shot, what we call a jam shot, um, or a hard charge. And that's where, let's say there's two players rushing on two players, and like let's say it's Cassian McDavid. McDavid has the puck. Cassian charges hard at the net, thus opening up a lane for McDavid to fall in
Right.
behind and get a shot. So
Right.
that's another category. So those four categories, and so
Yep.
we tracked that this year. I usually did the first tracking of it, and then you would go over my assignments, and if I made
Yep.
any mistakes or you had a major disagreement and thought I was wrong, you had the veto power, the power of veto, and so that's how that was our system for trying to come up with a less like just not subjective, not just one person's opinion on
Right.
whether it was right or not, but to have that kind of uh, uh, guidance or not surveillance. I can't think of the word, but
Right. Anyway, often we would discuss it if there was a
yes.
mild difference of opinion, but I've always kind of liked those categories of the hard plays at net, and especially the goalie screen and the hard charge, where the guy never touches the puck typically, never gets any points out of it, and yet is instrumental to the goal being scored. And the jam play, where he's actually the guy trying to stuff the puck in basically from inside the blue paint, is typically what a jam shot comes from, or
Yeah,
deflection. Well, I mean, if those go in, obviously the guy gets credit
gets a
for a
goal.
goal, but it's usually sort of a garbage goal as opposed to anything pretty. And it's just what the commentators call going to the dirty areas. And the Oilers have long had, to me, an absence on the team of forwards that are really willing to do that, or at least very successfully do that. And so it's a category I would, for years, I would have loved to have seen a similar sort of parallel project that somebody else did using the same categories on other teams that we could really compare. Because of course we've always only ever done this on the Oilers, so there's a little bit of self-referential bias to it. But I've always thought, just by observation, that the other teams got more goals doing these kind of things than the Oilers seem to. And this year, well, the stuff you tracked, there was some pretty positive stuff that I'll let you
Yeah, and this is the
introduce
first
here.
year we've tracked it, I think, in this amount of depth, where we have the coding down and everything down. So we're it's taken us. I've been at this for a long time now, this kind of video tracking, more than 10 years, but it's taken this long for us to work out a system, which I'm actually really happy with at this point. I think we're getting some really solid and interesting information about Oilers players. So this year, Bruce, the smallest player on the Edmonton Oilers, perhaps the smallest player in
In
the
the league,
NHL. Well, there's Nathan Gerb. Is that his name, Gerb? Nate,
Kirby.
Gerby, who's shorter. I don't know if he's smaller though. So the smallest player on the Oilers, perhaps in the entire NHL, and I think he is the smallest player in the NHL. Kyler
Oh,
Yamamoto made more hard, gritty plays on net, on grade A scoring chances and goals than any other Edmonton Oiler. Now, usually when I think of these guys, it's, these net front guys, it's, it runs the gamut from, Dan Maloney, Gary Dornhofer, Craig Simpson in the old days, to Milan Lucic and Thomas Holmstrom
Mhm.
in more recent times. And on the Oilers, there's Chason, Cassian, and James Neal. They're all big, tough guys who go to the front of the net. Yamamoto, on a per game basis, per minute basis, had more hard plays at the net than any of those other guys on the Oilers, than any of those big, rough net front guys. He had 0.7 per 15 minutes of ice time. Chason was at 0.6 per 15. Cassian, 0.57, and Neal, 0.42. It's interesting, Tyler Benson was also at 0.42. And I was thinking, if Tyler Benson's going to make the Oilers and make it as an NHLer, this is an area he must succeed at. This is an area where he's got to amp up his game considerably. But Yamamoto is a true wonder, Bruce. He is
Mhm.
a true wonder at this. And we've talked before about how, his wrestling career, he's talked
Huh.
about his wrestling career
Yes.
has enabled him to get kind of position on people, know how to compete. And does he ever do it? What an amazing hockey player. What a unique hockey player Kailer Yamamoto is.
Mhm. Well, he is, according to NHL.com, there's four players in the NHL who are shorter than his listed 5'8", um, including Nathan Gerby, 5'4", Rocco Grimaldi, Blake Lizotte, and Alex DeBrincat. But there is not a single player in the league that is lighter than Yamamoto's listed 153 pounds. He is the lightest player, skater at least.
Who's the
I
next
don't.
lightest? Do you have that?
Yeah, I sure do. Brent Seeney of New Jersey Devils, who played 2 games, as 156. Paul Byron of Montreal is 158,
Well, that's
and
Byron's an interesting player, eh?
Tyler Ennis at 161 is next. And so, Yamamoto, Byron, Ennis. I mean, these are small guys that just are. All of them, got a little bit of grit to their game, and go where angels fear to tread. If you'll don't mind the old cliche, um, but Yamamoto held his own in that respect, and then some. I mean, he didn't play the whole season, but in terms of as a rate, by your numbers, he was top of the pops, for the Oilers.
So Paul Byron he is a tough player, isn't he? He's another
Mm-hmm.
guy who's a pretty. I mean, just I
Five
just
nine, 158.
my concern about this kind of player
Mm-hmm.
is always their durability. And
Is it?
Yamamoto's been injured for parts of the last 3 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm looking at Byron here, man, he missed most of the year. I don't know what his injury was this year,
Yeah, he
and he
only
missed a
played
lot of
2 games.
last year too. He had 2 years where he played almost every game before that. So, it's an interesting, it's a very difficult thing, I think, for a player this size to remain healthy over the long term. So, but like as I said in my post on this, it's a worry for another day. We should just it's thrilling to watch Yamamoto. It was a game-changing moment for the Edmonton Oilers when he arrived in the team after Christmas. That line was fantastic. It was the best line, since I guess Horkoff, Hemsky, and Ryan Smith on the Oilers.
Phew.
You could
Well,
say
I make the
Hall,
case
Eberle,
for.
and Hall, Eberle, and RNH. But that wasn't a great.
McDavid, Draisaitl, Maroon.
Fair
You
enough,
know,
Bruce. Yeah. Well,
but
I
when
think
they
this line
really
was better.
stacked.
I would say this line was better than any of those lines.
Wow, yeah. Well, for the time, 30 games that they were together, they were dominant.
I guess we can look into that.
Mm.
Um, except that natural stat trick doesn't go back to Horkoff, Hemsky, and Smith. It goes back to just the year after that. I think the first year that natural stat trick allows us to do that line comparison is
Smith was
2007 and
gone.
8, and Smith
We
was
could get
gone.
Horpensky. They'd be pretty good.
Yeah, that was a good line too, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
very
was.
good. So, yeah, I don't have much
So,
more to say about that. Any other
so
thoughts on that?
well, you were just the numbers. You're on a like I think maybe Chason and a couple of the other guys had more raw numbers for making
Total.
those
Yeah.
kind of plays, but in terms of per 60 or per 15, I guess is how you do it. Yamamoto's number one.
Yeah, I do it per 15 because that's kind of the equivalent of a game of ice
Right.
time. I like to like per game, just makes sense for me to do it. Like per 60, that's 4 games for most players. So I've always liked the per 15, which I think it was not Eric Desjardins, but Gabriel Desjardins
Right.
behind the net. I think he did per 15 back in the day, the early stats days, and I always preferred that to per 60. So
Right.
that's why I use per 15. And on the power play, when I do the stats, I use per 2 minutes
Hmm.
because I think that's the appropriate
Now,
length of time.
remind me, these stats that you published today, this is all situations?
This is all situations, so it
Right.
includes shorthanded time. So, like
And
a
power
player like
play time.
Shane or Archibald, you're not going to get many hard plays of the net on the shorthanded. But the top 4 guys, Yamamoto, Chason, Cassian, and Neil, none of them played a significant amount of time on the penalty kill. I mean, what I might do next time is just put time on ice, even strength, and power play combined. I mean, you could break out every game situation in the numbers, but then it
You'll
gets to be a
find
lot of numbers.
Chaseon's contributions by far are tilted towards the power play.
Not well. He
And
had a lot
and
of even strength.
and Cassian's at even strength because Cassian doesn't play much power play. He had 10 goalie screens, and Chason, to my non-surprise, led the team with 12. They both had 15 jams, so there was some similarity there. But Chason's a lion's share of his would have been on the power play, and Cassian, almost all of it would be at even strength because he just really didn't play much power play at all.
Yeah. You know what this indicated to me, Bruce? That
Hmm.
Zach Cassian might be a really good power play guy. Like look at what he did just playing even strength.
Hmm.
If he was given that job in front of the net, like let's say Neil, for whatever reason, Neil isn't back
Right.
next year, and Chason is, if they're looking for another guy, don't look further than Zach Cassian. He
Right.
signed up to a long-term deal.
Well,
I think he could do that job.
I'll say don't look further than Kyler Yamamoto.
That'd be a
You
different
know,
power play. All well, isn't that the truth, Bruce? Like he
Yeah,
could
I mean,
be.
looking at these stats, I mean, one of these things is not like the other. You have these three
Yeah,
huge men, right? Chason, Cassie, and Neil, all older veterans, big, heavy, full-grown, hairy-ass men, as they say. And then you got this kid who's like the smallest, lightest player in the league, and at least on a rate basis, he's outperforming even in these strong, heavy. Uh, Dirty area types. It's really quite astonishing. And
yeah,
and to me, it's not like the numbers confirm what we saw with our eyes. I don't think we were giving him any benefit of the doubt here. I think he was going hard into those places and making stuff happen, and good things happened. Bet you if you did the same thing but only counted the ones that led to goals, he'd be on top of that list too.
yeah. In terms of goalie screens, and considering he didn't play the power play, his rate is almost about the same as well. It's a little below Chason's, but
Hmm.
yeah, like it's it's funny. I just completely overlooked him, which has probably happened to Kyler Yamamoto all his life. But he would be fantastic on the power play. Like if you could get him, because he's
At
got
front.
he's got he's got something that these other guys don't have. He's got elite skill in terms of passing the puck,
Mhm.
and his ability to win pucks
Yeah.
is second to none, I think, on the Oilers right now. Maybe McDavid, but in terms of like
Maybe
going in the corners,
Draisaitl.
stripping pucks off other people, Draisaitl, McDavid, and him are the best. So what better thing? Yeah, there's a real argument there for playing Yamamoto on the power play. So good catch there, Bruce. I give you credit on that. Start making that argument on a regular basis. Ready to move on to the next topic? Our next topic.
Yeah, I think so. I was just looking up one little thing here. This is just the takeaway stat.
I like saying our next topic because we have now the Doug and Bob monument here in Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
And they would always talk about what's our topic.
All right, yeah, Yamamoto, 19 takeaways, but per 60, if you look at takeaways per 60, like he's way behind McDavid, Draisaitl 60, Nuge 54, McDavid 53, but per 60, he's actually ahead of those guys. So
yeah,
on takeaway. So it steals of the puck. So I mean, he's
right
in. He's right. I mean, they're you could throw a blanket over all these guys around 2.4 per 60, but he's right in there with them. So
I wonder if we should start tracking takeaways. It's something we don't track, and I don't trust the NHL's numbers. I don't know if we do a better job, but I certainly don't trust the NHL's numbers.
I trust them this far. I trust them as far as all these guys are getting watched by the same scores throughout the game. I don't trust takeaways of any Oiler against any Flame, for example, because it's two different scores. But within a given team, they're getting judged by the same scores. So it does give you kind of an idea of who's better at this or that between that,
Sure.
the takeaways, the block shots, the hits, those kind of miscellaneous stats, as NHL calls them. So I put a little bit of stock in them, but my degree of confidence in them is not high because I miss a lot.
Yeah, that is a very good point that you made. Like in your team, they have some meaning, but not comparative team to team.
Yeah.
All right, Ken Holland, Bruce. I did a post earlier this week where I was praising Ken Holland for bringing in a lot of decent wingers. I mean, essentially the Oilers, when we entered this season and last season, probably the season before, we were wondering who's going to play with McDavid and Draisaitl. Like, are there enough good wingers? And it was a real question mark. Like entering the season, we thought, well, Draisaitl's probably going to play a lot with McDavid, and Nugent Hopkins is going to figure in there somewhere. He's going to be on one of their lines probably. But other than that, there was no sure things. But out of by the end of the year, there was there's at least four guys. There's James Neal, Zach Kassian, Kailer Yamamoto. There's five. Andreas Athanasiou and Tyler Ennis. So we went from 0 to about five guys who aren't bad options to play.
Well, Kassian was already there because he was he was up there the second half of.
There was a huge debate, Bruce. There was lots of people. The whole on ice analytics crowd completely doubted Zach Kassian heading into the year. Is the truth? Is that not true?
But Holland didn't get him, and he didn't really promote him. Like Yamamoto, he promoted, even though he sort of inherited him. The other three guys he mentioned, he went out and got. Right, he traded for James Neal. He traded for Tyler Ennis and Andreas Athanasiou. I'm going to get it eventually.
You got it. You nailed it. So, Bruce, when I looked into this, I found something. So I was thinking, I kind of knew because we've talked about this before, and I've written about this in recent years, how every year it seems to be the Oilers give away their top winger in the summer or in the season at some point. So I was thinking about this because, we all know the recent history of this. But then I thought, this actually goes back a little further than the Chiarelli era. And I did a little list. So the list, I'll just give you the list. And these are usually players that went on to have some success in other NHL cities after they left Edmonton, almost without exception. So in 2005-06, they had traded for Sergei Samsonov for the playoff run, but they didn't keep him after that. 2006-07, they lose Ryan Smith in a contract dispute in the season, and Joffrey Lupul after the season because he's worn out his welcome here, but he goes on in Toronto to play really strong hockey. 2007 and 8. This is one of the killers, Curtis Glencross.
Oh, I still hate this.
I think that they totally dropped the ball. They were so focused on Marian Hossa, bringing in Hossa. They were chasing him, and by the time they were done their Hossa escapade, they're tilting at that windmill. They had lost Curtis Glencross to the Flames. 2008-09, they lose Eric Cole in a trade for
Patrick O'Sullivan.
Okay, and then in 2010-11, they trade Dustin Penner. This is one where it worked out because they got a first pick for Penner, and they drafted Oscar Klefbom. 2011-12, this is another one that hurts. Andrew Cogliano is discarded. Now, there's some talk. I was talking to Bob Stauffer on his show about this, and he was saying, well, Cogliano had it in mind in Edmonton that he was a top-line guy. When he went to Anaheim, they read him the riot act and said, no, you're a third-line checker. It's a shame, though, that they couldn't
winger.
Yeah, third-line winger. It's a shame, though, that they couldn't have done that with Cogliano. And you know what? He was a strong player in Edmonton. That was nuts, I always thought.
Well, I mean, from what Stauffer says, he was one of those guys who needed what Craig McTavish always called a second opinion. He needed a second team to tell him the same thing the first team had already been trying to tell him before it sank in. But they got nothing for the guy. Like, he was a first-round pick in the 25th overall after the lockout when the Oilers drew a crappy bingo ball in the lottery. But they cashed it, and they got a good player. He came in at age 20, and he never missed a game. He played 328 games for the Oilers over 4 years, and they traded him for a second-round pick. Bye-bye. And for what? I mean, this is like a proven young NHL player with warts, but, speed and grit. I mean, that was obvious apparent. And he went on to become a pretty good player for Anaheim for a few years. Not a great player, but a useful player. And the Oilers were always pissing away good players, role players that they developed within. It was like they just didn't want a guy on their team after age 24 unless he was a first liner. It's like, tell me the last time the Oilers had a team that was built of, depth players that they developed themselves. I mean, I think you have to go back to 06.
Yeah, I thought Cogliano was really developing well in Edmonton. He didn't need a second opinion. He just needed to keep playing here, and he was going to be fine here. So, and then in consecutive years from 2014-15 on, they lose David Perron, Taylor Hall, Jordan Eberle, Patrick Maroon, and Ryan Strome. Yeehaw.
Ryan Strome. I mean, there's a guy. I mean, he was a center by the time they got rid of him. The fact is, they brought him in. He was a winger center. They could have tried him at wing. They tried him at wing for about 5 minutes. They moved him to center. He wasn't bad at center. And they thought, well, we need scoring on the wing. Let's trade him for a scoring winger without ever looking at him on the wing again. Like, he never got a chance on the wing. And they traded him for Ryan Spooner. And, of course, they put him on the wing, and he was useless. Man, I still hate that trade, too. And that's only 2 years old. So that memory stings even more than Curtis Glencross. But, I mean, some of these moves were just downright dumb. There's no other way to describe them.
Yeah, they had signed Lucic, of course, so that meant Maroon had no obvious home here in Edmonton.
Or home.
Eberle, I think the coach had lost faith in Eberle at that point, and a lot of fans that it was pretty toxic here. I think he had to go. Well, let's not talk about the Taylor Hall trade. Jesse Puljujarvi could also be on the list. Now that's in Holland's time, but it's still undetermined what's going to happen there. And I think that was a move also that had to happen. I think this was the best thing for Puljujarvi. I think it was great for him to go back to Finland for a year. And it was for the Oilers, it was a great thing because they couldn't send him to the AHL anymore. They would have had to move him out or go through another kind of wandering year in Edmonton. So that was actually the best thing that could have happened for the Oilers and probably for Puljujarvi. And we'll see what happens there, Bruce. I haven't given up.
So, and I mean, this is still an incomplete list. I see there's no sign of Linus Ullmark on this list, David, and also Magnus Pujärvi. You remember the Hope? Remember when Hope came in? All Ullmark, Pujärvi, Eberle, all his rookies, all wingers at the same time.
They had to do well in another. They had to do well in another NHL city, so I didn't include those guys.
No, I know Pujärvi had his moments, but no, you can't really say he excelled when he moved along.
Well, it's too early to tell with him, is what I would say. We don't know. That's indeterminate. Bruce, the power play. So you're starting in the shorthanded system. You're starting to do your year in review series. So what you're going to do in the next month is start with the team, and then do every player kind of give a season-ending look at their season. This is something that we do every year. We've done every year for years, and for a decade. And so you're going to be starting in on that. You're starting in with the Oilers as a team, and you're looking at special teams to start. What have you found?
Well, special teams being the difference, because at even strength this year, I mean, the team has moved up to 9th in the league in points, 12th in points percentage. after a couple of years, the ranking, in 23rd, 25th overall the previous 2 years. But you know what? At 5-on-5, they haven't actually improved all that much. They were uh, they were 21st in the league in goals for percentage 2 years ago, 29th last year, 25th this year. Like, that's not very good. And yet they're um, uh, in the top half of the league in both goals for and goals against. And the main reason for that is the huge improvement in their penalty kill, which of course has been talked about all year. But just to quantify some of these numbers, at uh, the Oilers have, they're first in the league in power play percentage by a mile, 29.5%. Boston second at 25.2. That's a huge gap. They're second overall in penalty kill percentage,
Wow.
84.4%. So overall, their special teams percentage, just to add the two together, and an average team would be around 100%. Oilers 113.9, and Boston second at 109.4. Just a giant gap between first and second. And there's only three teams above 105, and then many of them, of course, cluster between 95 and 105, sort of in the middle of the pack. But the Oilers are not just above that; they're way above that. And if you look at it as straight at goal differential, and you leave out shorties and just look at power play goals for, power play goals against, Edmonton plus 28, Boston plus 23, Vancouver plus 17. No other team in the NHL were in double digits. So that huge goal differential on the special teams more than made up the minus 18, I think it was. The Oilers were at 5v5 this year and made them an outscoring team. And as we've studied before, I mean, there's been many games this year where the power play and special teams flat out won the game. The Oilers win 3-2 and they get two power play goals and give up zero, you know, and they turn, what was a loss at 5v5 into an outright win. That happened several times. And just the improvement in the power play, and less um, trumpeted, but almost equally important, was the huge, huge improvement in the penalty kill. And that some of it's on management bringing in the right players, some of it's on coaching, teaching the right system, some of it's on the players. But you put it all together, and it was that mammoth improvement on special teams that turned the Oilers from an also-ran into a fairly credible contender.
Yeah, I haven't studied the penalty kill yet. That's kind of next one of the things that's
Hmm.
next on my list. Exactly what went right there. But I did I think a 4 or 5 part series on the power play. And
Yeah,
in
it was
the end, I
good.
think I'm left with like why the power play suddenly became so good. Well, I think a huge part of it was just familiarity with those players. They played together. They've played together quite a bit now. Two
Hmm.
years, pretty much the same unit
Hmm.
since Chason moved there. So and in the same spots, and they of course unleashed McDavid. They instead of
Hmm.
anchoring him on the right half wall, they've let him move about freely. Drysaitl's more often there in that shooting position.
Hmm.
Um, the other key takeaway is Clefbaum shooting a lot less. The Oilers settling for point shots a lot less, and him just really working the puck either to Nugent Hopkins on one side or Draisaitl on the other or McDavid on the other. Him becoming a passer and not a shooter. And
I
the
found
third
that
thing, go
post
ahead.
of yours, sorry, was the one that really was an eye opener in terms of it's not just about shot volume and funneling pucks to the net. Like when you were showing, Sekera and Klefbom getting the most shots in the power play, never scoring. And then when they started more, Klefbom feeding the puck and the big guys getting a higher share of the shots and the goals for rocketed up. And I'm not sure the total shots, matters a hill of beans. It's who's taking the shots.
Yeah.
And that was a very convincing bit of work that you did there, David, shots taken per uh, was it per 60 anyway on the power
Yeah.
play, and it went from the shin pad assassin to Leon Draisaitl one timers. Well, I know I'd rather have one of the latter than five of the former.
Yeah. And it was like I didn't know that going into that series. It was interesting to
No, of
do that research, and it was I
course.
was kind of halfway through the series when I started to look at that, and I thought, "Holy
Holy
moly,
cow.
this is fascinating." He's taken, the Clefbaum. We're getting about half the number of point shots, but the power play's gone from being terrible or mediocre to being fantastic. And the third thing, this year especially, what clicked in, there was a big difference. It was interesting because Neil was very effective. I think he was one of the, in the top 30 in terms of James Neal in terms of power play point production. But the Oilers' power play was a lot more deadly when Chason was on the ice. And my theory is it was again about this is just like Clefbaum. When you don't need everybody to be a superstar on the power play. Some guys have just got to do a role. And I think Chason he mastered this year that role of just really being around the goalie. Because when he's down there low around the goalie, you can't ignore him because those guys will put the puck into him and he'll deflect it into the net or jam it into the net.
Make a
So
pass.
so yeah. So when he was down there, the defense had to respect him and cover him, and that opened up passing lanes more for the other guys. So I think he was slightly better than that at Neil, and I think that was seen in the Oilers' significantly better goal production when he was on the ice per minute compared to Neil. Even though Neil obviously he was really strong at the power play as well at his particular skill, which is deflecting pucks and shooting in pucks from the crease.
Yeah, well, one thing that they did that I thought was a nice wrinkle was when they decided, well, the second power play unit's never going to score anyway, so let's go with the first unit for a minute and 50. But what they did was they would alternate out Neil for Chason halfway through the power play, and it wouldn't always be the same guy starting there. Like they were kind of given equal role when both were available, when Neil wasn't hurt, and Chason kind of worked out at the beginning of the season. It was all Neil, and Chason just kind of started getting more and more chances there, and he made the most of those chances. So I started giving him pretty much equal time, and so you had the guy in the grinding position. There's no reason to expect all five guys to play a minute and 50 seconds. So they did make that wrinkle where they left most of the power play out, but they changed out that one guy, typically a minute or so into the power play. The other thing you talked about, the 2 year thing, and of course the Oilers had three coaches in those 2 years, but they've had one coach coaching the power play, and that's Glenn Gulitson, and he deserves some credit for this as well.
Yeah, well, I think that's when the philosophy change occurred from shooting from the outside, shoot all the time from the outside to work the puck around a little bit more and try to set up the top shooters in their best spots, and also freeing up McDavid to roam. So yeah, he and I was looking at his record in other cities because I was thinking, is he always been like a power play, the power play Yoda? But he hasn't. The power plays in Calgary, I think, were not that great. And I just took a quick look, so I can't say this with certainty, but I wasn't. The initial check that I made was no, he hadn't had this kind of outstanding success in other cities on the power
But
play.
in Calgary, as a head coach, he would not necessarily have been the man
Fair
focusing on
enough.
power play, whereas in Edmonton, that's been a big part of his duties, and he's getting the job done.
He is. Well, Bruce, I know that you are looking forward to getting out on a walk,
Hmm.
to walk the
Every day.
dog every
Oh,
day, and
no.
it's a good thing
Oh,
to do.
the dog can't keep up with me, David. The dog's 17, almost 18 years
Oh,
old.
you just go out on your own.
So I just go out my own, stroll the paths of the river valley of St. Albert. Beautiful, beautiful city it is out here, and been getting out every day, even before the COVID. Nowadays, it's my connection to the world anymore, because of course we're not gathering and we're not doing all the things we used to do. But going out and walking by myself is socially distant as I can get. So
Well, that's a nice thing to do.
yeah,
Maybe I'll
that's it.
go do the same.
Right?
I'm near the experimental farm at the U of A,
Yeah, that's a
and
real
that
good.
is an extremely empty and peaceful
Wow.
and a kind of beautiful place to go for a walk. So wide open in the middle of the city. So I might head out there. All right, Bruce. Thanks
All
for
right.
talking today.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks for the people that have given us the feedback on the podcast and encouraging us to keep it coming. That it's a nice change of pace, and I don't think any of us needs to live COVID-19 24/7. I mean, it's dominating our lives, but it doesn't have to be every single second of every single day. I don't know that I can handle it, and I don't know many people who could, to be frank. I mean, it's nice to it obviously it's number one on the list of things we think about, but it can't be one and only. So it's nice to get feedback from others that you're enjoying our little fantasy pursuits of where the Oilers were and where they might be going, and we'll keep doing it as long as as we're in demand. So especially thanks for listening, folks.
And I would also right now recommend two movies. Like the other thing I do, aside from writing about the Oilers now and then, because I have been researching COVID stuff nonstop for my real
Yeah, I
job,
know you
right?
have.
Like
I
just
know you
just
have.
nonstop, and there's so much to learn. But we watched two movies this week by the same director. I can't recall his name, but one of them was called Midsummer, and the other one's Hereditary, and they're both kind of modern horror movies, and they were both absolutely outstanding. Just
Oh,
very, very weird, interesting, tense, frightening movies, but not these not the gore movies
right.
like that genre. These are more like, I guess, Stephen King, but I would say a cut above anything from Stephen King, if I'm completely honest, other than maybe The Shining. Just fantastic movie. So if you like that kind of moving, I would compare it to the same sense you get from The Shining, or from a long time ago. Remember Wicker Man? Did you ever see that with Edward
I did not.
Woodward?
I did not.
That's
Edward. Oh,
that was a weird one from the 70s. So those two movies are worth watching. One of them, Midsummer, is on Amazon Prime, and then Hereditary is on Netflix. All right.
oh, okay. I went back and I think I might have talked about 12 Monkeys, so I won't dwell on it. But I had to watch it. It was so bugging me and kind of reminding me of the day because there's a
Was it good?
virus unleashed on humanity. And the Gilliam movies. You talk about weird and interesting movies. Anything Terry Gilliam did, Fisher King, uh, Brazil. He's quite an intimate Monty Python guy, of course, and he did lots of wild stuff. And 12 Monkeys is still gripping. I really enjoyed it, and the modern sort of twist with the virus thing just kind of made it that much more chilling in terms of its relevance. So I recommend that movie. That was a real good watch.
All righty. Thanks again, Bruce.
All right, thanks.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.